on, Foxy. It's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
Hui! Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome back to the Moana Nui podcast. Happy Aloha Friday. It is good to be with all of you again. As you folks probably know, unless this is the first time you're tuning in, my name is Moana McAdams, and I am the host of the Moana Nui podcast. Tonight, we are resuming our segment in coordination with Papa Ola Lokahi. This is our Kāne Voices segment, highlighting the Kāne in our community. And tonight, we are joined by our host tonight is going to be Conan Wykes, whom we heard from in our first episode last month. So let's welcome Conan to the show. Aloha, Conan.
Hey, aloha, Moana.
And then our special guest tonight is brother Ian Awai. So we're going to have him join us tonight from the cold tundra of Seattle.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. Alrighty. Mahalo for being with us, guys. So for those of you tuning in, thank you guys for joining us. Please engage with us in the comments. This is a talk story session. If you have questions, comments, please, we want this to be interactive. Drop them in the comment section and we'll bring them up as the show goes along. But for the time being, I'm going to hand it over to Conan.
Oh, yeah. Aloha, Maika Ko. If no one tuned into the last one, my name's Conan Wykes, and I work with Papa Ola Lokahi in the Workforce Development Department called Maoli Ola Lama Lama. Thank you for joining us live, and thank you for if anyone's going to watch the recording later as well. And I'll let Ian introduce himself.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me here. My name is Ian Awai. I am a physician assistant who went through the Papa Ola Lokahi program with the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program. And I worked on Oahu with urgent care and primary care for a few years, and I currently work in the emergency department here in the cold Western Washington state here on the continent. Tundra is a good way to describe it, though, by the way.
Yeah, and as you said, you're a recipient of the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program, and you've done all of that hana to get where you are. But tell us a little about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Firstly, I am who we and between the two, my dad. And my mom is actually from Mexico, and we lived there for a few years till I was about 10 years old, and then we moved to Washington State, where I lived throughout my adolescence. Went to school here at the University of Washington, got my degree in physician assistant clinical studies, and after that, before that time, I applied for the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program and got placement on Oahu. Working, I lived in the Ewa Beach area, and that's where I was for a little over 3 years. Yeah, and then we moved back due to some family things that we had going on. So we ended up moving back to Western Washington. And that's where I currently reside.
That must have been, I think, a good experience for you, being able to come back home and do do your service here. Where your father grew up, and you being a Kanaka Kāne, a Native Hawaiian male, being able to come back home and give back service to the Lahui. How did that make you feel?
It definitely filled a void. In healthcare, you always want to know that you're making a difference, that you're actually, helping people. And I think that's one thing that the scholarship program emphasizes and does such a good job at. And so, yeah, definitely helped me not realize, but it helped me feel kind of that fulfillment of, truly helping people, especially in that setting where, that's what the job is, or the job is improving the lifestyles, improving education, and healthcare in general. That goes far beyond what our job was or what my job was. But yeah, it definitely helped, especially coming back to people that, you know, um, you know, as far as, the Native Hawaiian population, it definitely helped kind of give you that sense of pride, right? Of fulfillment of having been able to, have done that. So yeah, no, it was definitely an experience that I'll forever cherish. That definitely helped me grow as a human or as a person, as well as a medical provider.
That's so awesome. I mean, just thinking about, your pathway, you know, did you always kind of have, an interest in healthcare? And I mean, well, first of all, too, I mean, are you a first generation college student?
I am. I am. So I have an uncle that went, but as far as myself, yeah, my father was PD. His father was PD, and so there wasn't, as far as college, there wasn't a whole lot of that. But and eventually my dad ended up going back to school. But yes, as far as when I went, I am, and and so to answer the question about healthcare, no, actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to. I used to watch a lot of like marine biology shows, Jacques. I remember my mom had a big collection of the Jacques Cousteau, his books, and I was like, man, like for the longest time, I wanted to go into marine biology. I wanted to go dive with sharks. I wanted to, swim in the ocean and explore, right? And that was always the dream when I was a kid. Um, and then I remember when I was a kid, we used to watch, like back in the day, they had like Unsolved Mysteries, yeah. And then they used to have, and I remember after that, they would have a show called Rescue 911. For all you guys, from the 90s, that was a show that was hosted by William Shatner. And they would talk about emergencies and they would highlight stories with police officers, with medical providers, with EMTs, paramedics. And I remember watching that show going, wow, that'd be cool to do that one day, to be able to do some of those things. And that I think was the turning point in what piqued that interest. Because I said earlier, I would have been a third generation police officer. There's a lot of law enforcement in my family, and that to me it wasn't something that I wanted to go into.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I definitely admire everybody who does that, but to me that just wasn't. I didn't feel like that was my calling. Um, and I remember my uncle, who's a nurse anesthetist in Jacksonville, Florida, was telling me, he goes, "Hey, you ever think about going in, to medicine?" And I was like, "Well, kind of. I did when I was, I had these moments, and then I started thinking. Then I met a friend of mine who was a firefighter, paramedic, and then I went shadowed him for a little bit, and then I ended up going to paramedic school training, and I did that for a few years. But that was what really kind of peaked and was the influence that I had around me, friends, family, um, and I guess the TV that I watched, right, programs
Yeah,
as a kid.
I used to love Jacques Cousteau. The narration, yeah, in his French accent,
Yeah,
they're
yes.
underwater. Yeah, I don't think I ever wanted to swim with sharks, though.
Oh yeah, I still do. We went when I was in Hawaii. We went, but yeah, I would do that on an instant, in a heartbeat, if I could.
That's awesome. I know
Yeah,
paramedics work very closely with police officers. A lot of this
yeah,
kind of yeah
yeah,
the
absolutely, we did.
yeah. So and yeah, being
Mhm.
a police officer is an extremely difficult job. Um, I mean, so you get an interest in healthcare, you become an EMT or paramedic, and then you make the jump some point from that to becoming a physician's assistant. Yeah. Well, I mean, what was the interest there to go back to school? I mean, you could have just stopped right there, right?
Um, you're right, absolutely. At the time, at least in this area, when I was growing, in this area in Washington, it's very competitive because to be a paramedic, a lot of times it's through a fire department to be a firefighter. And I was an intern with the fire department in my undergrad training. I did it.
You're muted. Sorry.
Okay, he's back. There we go.
Can you hear me?
We got you back in. Sorry about that. We lost you for a second.
No worries. Sorry about that. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So to be a paramedic. So yeah, I loved it. It was very rewarding. I did it for 5 years. I worked with the Bureau of Prisons for a year for part of that time, and I felt like I could do more. I know I had this itch that I wanted to do, and not to say that I wasn't doing enough, but I felt like I really fell in love with kind of the clinical side of medicine as opposed to firefighting. And yeah, so that kind of drew my attention. I had a friend, a mentor of mine who was a PA, a physician assistant, and he encouraged me. He goes, "Hey, listen," and I had this intuition in my head. I was like, it's a risk because I had 2 kids. I had one on the way. I already had I felt like where I was at, I was comfortable. All right. I was comfortable. I had a good job. It was paying the bills, and I was like, I'm okay where I'm at, but I still had this urge and this feeling in the back of my mind that I couldn't shake that said, hey, maybe we're not done, and I told my wife, I said, listen, this is crazy, but I think I need to go back to school. And I thought that I was gonna get kicked out of the house right then and there, right? But no, she was actually very receptive, and she said, "No, if you're feeling that's right, let's make this happen." I looked into PA school. I went to an orientation, and everything just kind of fell in line. I had a couple prerequisites that I had to take that I didn't have done prior to that, so I had to apply to community college in the area, and I was nervous because I had to do math and all that. Math was not my strong suit, and having to go back to math class after so many years of not doing it. I mean, I graduated my undergrad in 2013, and I went back to school to do this in 2017. So it had been a few years. And I was like, I'm rusty. I haven't been in a classroom. I'm nervous. And there was a lot of room to fail. There's a lot of room for failure. And I said, you know what, let's just do this. I think, and I read a quote, something about, the only risk is not taking it. And I said, okay, let's just do this. Let's see what happens. And I had a strong support system, but yeah, we went through, and I passed all my prereqs. I applied to one PA school because I was like, I'd rather not have to leave the state if we're here where we're at. And I got in first round interviews. It went in, everything worked out. I applied to this PA program or the scholarship program because the next step was, okay, obviously you would think about how am I going to pay for schooling, right? Okay, now I'm in. How am I going to do this? And I had a friend of mine who was a physician, and he was like, hey, listen, you should look into this scholarship program. And he had said that he was thinking about doing it, but he ended up not doing it. And he regretted not doing it. And he said, hey, listen, if you get a chance, you should look into this. And I remember looking at it going, wow, what an opportunity. I knew it was a competitive, they had a lot of applicants, but I thought, you know what, let's just try and see what happens. And I'm grateful for it because, yeah, it not only was it nice, was it good to help pay for schooling, but it obviously, like we talked about earlier, it opened that door to be able to provide, healthcare in Hawaii, which was something that I'd wanted to do. So yeah, things just kind of fell in place for me, when.
Oh, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work, but it's amazing that I mean, it's very important as well. I think that your wife was very supportive. Obviously, I mean, he has had a family already, and like you said, one on the way. And I don't think a lot of people would be very understanding, in that situation. And so, I mean, working hard is one thing, but having support is extremely important as well. And I was just kind of curious. So, whatever happened to your friend?
Oh, the one, oh yeah. Well, I told him thank you. Yeah, no, he works in Eastern Washington. But he at the time he had thought about it, but he'd already passed. He was already, got through his residency program, and he was like, listen, I kicked myself because he wasn't sure if he wanted to go into general practice, so that's why he didn't do it. But then he ended up going into general practice. He goes, that's the biggest. He goes, I can't. He goes, that's the biggest regret of mine. He goes, that I didn't take this opportunity.
And during your service time too, you spent. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're fine. No.
I was saying, during your service time too, not just talking about the support from your family, but I mean, you also did you did your service. Not you just going back to school and having the support there, but you did your service here on Oahu while your family was still on the continent, right?
For part of the time, yeah. So we all moved together after I graduated. We were there together, but there was a portion at the end where they did have to move back for some stuff, and then I ended up staying there for a few months. But during school, I did do some rotations in Hawaii by myself while my family was here in the mainland too. And I rotated in a couple areas in the North Shore, up in the Ko'olauloa Community Health Center, the Waianae Comprehensive Center, so in the emergency room there. So I did a fair share of time in Hawaii, yes, away from family. But like you said, I don't think I would have been able to do this without the support of my family, especially my wife and my kids. Like you said, it was almost every excuse not to do it. Like again, two kids. My wife was pregnant with a third. In fact, she had given birth, and we were in the hospital, and I was taking a test online. Uh, while obviously at nighttime, on the side, trying to get stuff done. Not while she was, but on the side, trying to get that stuff done. And so again, there were so many reasons not to do it. Right, like I said, we were comfortable, we were in a good spot. Why do I have to up in my life to go back? And I look back, and I don't ever regret doing any of that.
That's awesome. I was about to ask that too. I mean, obviously, having no regrets. I mean, um, your wife must be very happy too that I mean, you're seeing how hard you worked and now where you're at now. I mean, you're very happy in your position now as a physician assistant.
Yeah, very. Yeah, I'm forever grateful for the opportunities that were presented, and the connections I was able to make with, coworkers, patients, with the family that I had there still in Hawaii. There was just a lot of opportunity laid before. Um, but again, it was all because I had support. All right, I don't think again, and I reemphasize this, that there was no way I was going to be able to do that. I remember telling my wife before this all started, like, listen, I'm not going to do this if you're not on board. So either if you're on board, great. I'm not going to fight through this because there's no way I can do this without your help. And no hesitation, right? Like, let's do it. Done.
That's awesome.
And so it was terrific.
Did your family like living here, or did they?
Oh, they loved it. Yeah, no. It was so great because in Washington, it rains like 9 months out of the year, and so and so doing stuff outdoors. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great outdoor stuff over here, but it's not the same. Uh, and my kids just loved, not only going to the beach, the hikes, the food, the culture, the environment. Yeah, they loved it. They made a lot of good friends there, to which we still keep in contact with. But yeah, overall, it was a great experience.
How often do you come back, or did
Well,
you been back since?
no, not yet. We moved back in February, and so no, I haven't been back since. I'd like to be back soon. Um, but I'd like to be back, regularly, check in. But I still keep in touch with, the friends and then the coworkers and the family that I have there. So, but yeah, no, unfortunately, I haven't been able to be back yet. But the transition, it was a transition to move back. So, still kind of in the process of that transition, but it's working out.
I know you moved from Washington to Hawaii, and then you moved back to Washington.
Yeah,
As a kid, I would have been kind of upset, like, "Oh, I like it over here too much,"
yeah. No, they clicked right back, and to move in the middle of winter too. That's by the way, like we moved. They moved in December. I moved in February, and I went from 80-degree weather to 35-degree weather overnight. You know, and so it was just 2 feet in, right? Just had to make the adjustment.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I was wondering, what part of the island did you guys live on? Where you guys were here on Oahu?
we were in Eva Beach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Iroquois Point. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a nice area. My family live out there as well.
Yeah.
What do you miss the most about living here?
A lot. Well, obviously the weather. That's one thing, but you miss. At least for me, I miss definitely um, there's a mindset and culture of, hey, relax, everything's gonna work out, right? And that's the mentality that I miss. Obviously, miss the beach. I miss going to the store and buying, a musubi and a bowl of poke, right? And that's not something we get over here. I remember when my daughter called. I had a daughter that called me when I was in Hawaii. Still, they were already here. She calls me. She goes, "Dad, she's like 7-Eleven over here sucks. They got nothing to eat over here." I go, "Yeah, I know," because she wanted a musubi. Um, but yeah, it's just different. The things you take for granted, right, over there. And not to say there's no opportunity here, but it's very different. There's a very different change in the mentality on the island, right, with that culture. to the mainland, to the continent. I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with being here, but it's different. It's different. You can tell.
There is in Washington State. There's a community of local people and also indigenous people as well.
There's
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's nice to have social media because everybody can kind of congregate on social media and kind of connect that way. But there is, I still see people. I meet people from Hawaii all the time at work. Patients that come in, and you can tell by the way they talk, the way they act. And then it strikes conversation, right? Because they notice my last name, they see their last name. Oh, hey, and then you can just tell. You can kind of, I don't know, it's like a sixth sense of being able to detect who's from Hawaii over here. But it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah. And how did they react like when they hear that you're Hawaiian? Some of these patients.
It's funny. I get two different reactions. I get, oh yeah, I could tell, and then I get, oh wow, I thought you was Haole. I'm like, okay, all right. But yeah, I get two different reactions from that. But overall, it's always great. I had coworkers that I work with that are from Hawaii too, and I'm just it definitely brings out it brings out a side that is nice being around people from the islands.
I always get when I'm on the continent. I thought you were Mexican.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I am half Mexican too, so it's like. Or they'll be like, "Oh, your last name's Awai. That's not Hispanic." I go, "Yeah, you can be two things, And they're like, "Oh, no, you're not Hawaiian. You're Mexican." Yeah. They'll be like, "Oh no, I thought you're Mexican," because I'll start speaking Spanish, and they're like, "Oh no, but I thought you were from Hawaii." I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, I'm not just one race. Like you can have that is possible.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a little bit of both, but yeah, that's funny because here it's, they do that. That's funny that they think you're Mexican.
Yeah. I'm like three things. So you could be born in even born in just two things as well. But that is,
absolutely.
It is interesting to see people's mindset sometimes. How when they're kind of blown away to know that you have more than one ethnicity. It's like
oh no way. It's like
So now you're at home. It's the winter time. You're preparing for the cold. There.
Oh yeah, we're in the middle of it. And it's daylight. They do daylight savings here, in the mainland. So hours change and whatnot. So it starts getting dark at 4:30. And so that's kind of weird. That's a concept I never really understood when I moved here. When I was a kid, they're like, "Oh yeah, daylight savings." I'm like, "What do you mean daylight savings?" They're like, "Yeah, you turn the clock back." And to me, that made no sense. It still doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it gets dark. 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's already nighttime.
Can you tell me about some of the challenges that maybe you've experienced about working as a Kanaka in healthcare?
Yeah, I think this is probably not unique to being Kanaka, but we definitely see it more, and especially being in Hawaii, where we have, with training, you know what can happen if you don't do certain things, right? You have people who come in with diabetes, they have high blood pressure, they have, family history of it, they have all these things. And I saw this a lot when I was working in primary care, where it's a generational thing where a lot of times they don't get healthcare because it just wasn't a priority, right? They're busy working, they're busy doing other things that they forget to take care of themselves. And so you'll get people that come in with all these health problems, they're not on any medicine, and they're like, okay, I need to be fixed. Well, it's like, well, listen, we can't just overnight fix. And so I think that was the biggest challenge was, or people that know they're supposed to do certain things, right? They have diabetes, they have, family history of strokes and whatnot, and they don't want to take care of themselves. And in the back of your mind, I know exactly what's going to happen if you don't take care of yourself. And that to me was the challenging part. Especially in healthcare, and especially being in Kanaka, Kanaka Maoli, working in Hawaii, knowing that there are certain high risk factors with in the Kanaka community, right? We are more prone to diabetes and high blood pressure, and certain heart problems, heart disease. It's rampant, and knowing that these things can happen. And the frustrating thing for me was trying everything I can to express, caution, because you can only, there's a saying in healthcare that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And that's kind of what it is. I can tell you everything you need to know, but if you don't want to do anything about it, there's not much I can do for you. And that was the hardest thing, because I'm there, it's like screaming at a wall, because with some of these patients that are just stubborn, and we are stubborn people. I'm stubborn. You can ask my wife; she'll be the first person to tell you that. We're set in our ways, right? Sometimes, and unfortunately, that takes a toll. And in some cases, people just don't want to listen. And I understand. We gotta. I think there's a lot more to it than just not wanting to do it. But that was probably the biggest struggle, I would say.
Yeah, I think what you say rings so true about these kind of cultural issues and being stubborn, and I've experienced it personally. With family members, they don't until they're like absolutely almost almost dead already. Then they go to the doctor, and by then it's just too late, and it's unfortunate. But can you share any tips for people with generational kind of issues? And is there something that like diabetes and those kind of things are familial, right? You see those kind of things running in families, right? What can you do? Any tips for people like that?
Yeah, well, the first thing to do is recognize that it runs in your family, right? And just because you don't have it now, because would see this a lot. Oh, I don't have diabetes now, but yet your dad has it, your grandpa has it, your great grandpa died from it, your mom has it. Pretty sure you're gonna get it, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not that. So the biggest thing is one, recognizing it, and I think the biggest thing people can do is, be active. Go do things. Do your check-ins. A lot of people, especially if you're over 40 or 50, right? That's when the health problems start. Really, yeah, things are great when you're 20s and your 30s and into your 40s, but when that clock strikes 50, that's when you got to start getting things like colonoscopies, right? You got to start getting blood tests, seeing the doctor every 3 to 6 months.
Mhm.
And those are kind of the big things, is establishing care with somebody so that you can, get things done, and stay on top of it. It's like a car, you don't get the oil change. What's going to happen? Your car is going to break down.
Mhm.
And it's kind of the same thing. We just have to want to care. And I
Mhm.
feel like finding a way to care about it, whether it be, again, staying active, being busy, doing things, getting your body moving. I think those are important things to do, uh, in the long term, especially.
Have you seen, when talking about these kind of chronic diseases, have you seen, any kind of disparity between, men or women, in, in your experience? Is-
Yeah. I think the disparity comes with, it's a cycle. And I've shared this with some friends of mine before because we were talking about this. And I think the COVID pandemic exposed this. What happens is we all know that it's expensive to live in Hawaii, right? It's very expensive to maintain a life there, especially when you have a family. And a lot of times you get multiple generations in a house, right? And so a lot of times it's, I gotta work, I gotta work, I gotta work, I gotta put food on the table. And I knew a lot of patients that could barely get a day off, that were working 7 days straight. That's all they do, is go to work, like no days off, because they had to put food on the table. And because of that, the cycle is, I'm so busy working, I don't take care of my health. And then I don't take care of my health, I get sick. I get sick, I'm out of work, and the cycle continues.
Right.
And it's tough, it's hard. And I think the disparity is, not necessarily between men and women. I mean, I think men and women they both succumb to their own health problems, right? Cholesterol issues with women, heart problems in men. I mean, they're both they both kind of equally, at least in my experience that I've seen, both kind of go through their own things. Um, Men tend to be a little bit more stubborn than women, uh, but that just comes with the territory, I guess. But I think the disparity comes from, you know, not necessarily, I'm stubborn, I don't want to go to the doctors. There's a bridge, there's a gap of trust between healthcare and the people, right? We saw this with the COVID pandemic that exposed this, um, especially in places of poverty on the island. You look on the island, right? The poor areas, right? Areas in downtown, areas on the west coast, in Eva, right? There are areas that are poorer, and because of that, they don't trust healthcare because they think that healthcare are there to take their money,
Mhm.
and not solve their problems. You see this a lot, and it's an unfortunate thing. And so I think the disparity is. a lack of education, a lack of being honest and being and listening. Okay, in healthcare, yeah, we do a lot of talking, and I think that's fine, but we don't do a lot of listening. And I think a lot of times we're so focused on telling the patient what they need to know and
Mm.
getting out for the next one that we forget to sit down and listen. And that's something that it took me a long time for me personally to learn.
And that's like a modeling behavior too, right? When like
Yeah,
you grow up, you see your father just work, 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 because that's what he believes
yeah,
he has to do. You're
yeah,
right. You grow up thinking, oh, that's what is expected of me too, to go work or work and not
yeah,
worry about the other things, and it's unfortunate talking about the cycle, right? That just keeps going on and on and on until somehow it gets
yeah.
broken,
Yeah.
and are there any like particular challenges for Native Hawaiian healthcare professionals who work outside of Hawaii?
I think the challenges are, I mean, I don't think anywhere you go is free of its own. I think every place has their own challenges. There are places that are uh, the people are more well off than others. But I think healthcare in general, especially people of color, whether you're on Hawaii or not, or whether you're on the mainland, I think there is a disparity in healthcare with people of color, just because people of color tend to live in areas of traditionally there's poverty amongst them, right? Because again, and I don't know what the answer for that part is, but I think the challenge is even here on the mainland is that lack of trust, right? They don't trust. They don't like other people telling them what to do. And I think sometimes when they see somebody, and I think this was so nice in Hawaii, when they see somebody that kind of looks and acts and talks like them, they are more prone to listen
Mm.
and they are more prone to understand because they feel like, hey, this guy can relate to me. This guy knows my struggles. He understands what I'm saying. I didn't grow up rich. I grew up poor. I grew up, we struggled.
Mhm.
And I think being honest, there are times when a patient will ask me a question I don't know the answer to. I tell them I don't know,
Mhm.
but they don't want to. I feel like they need to know that they're not being lied to, and they don't want to feel like they're being lied to, even though we're not out to lie or cheat. Um, I think the disparity and the struggle, even here on the mainland, is that right there.
Mhm.
Is this person looking out for my best interest, right? And I think
And I
that's
think, unfortunately, the medical field historically, there's been some bad things done, and
yeah,
especially with people of color. And
hmm,
yeah, I think the first thing that you've mentioned it right, that trust issue is a huge issue. That a huge
yeah,
barrier that you need to get over. And when you start trusting your physician process, I think then that's when you can start breaking that cycle. But
yeah,
yeah, and there's maybe so much more than that, right? So much layers there to really work through and peel away. And hopefully someday, we'll start peeling more away, right? But I think people like you, right, being a Kanaka Kāne and being more understanding and not just being Kanaka, but being also, half Mexican, right? I mean,
yeah,
you can relate and you understand. I think your patients must see you, right? And they go, hey, I mean, you must have patience because I know there's a lot of indigenous people that live
there,
in Washington State, and there are Native Hawaiians that live there too. So when you encounter them, they must be really happy, yeah. I mean, I think that
yeah,
you get a connection, right?
yeah. You can, yeah, and there is, but like you said, there's Native Hawaiians, there's Samoans, there's Tongans, African Americans, you get Native Americans. There's a strong Native American community in this area, and same thing. The Native American population went through similar things that the Native Hawaiians went through, right? In the sense of, displacement and all that, which is a different topic. But yeah, that lack of trust, right? The trust between people of color, but when they do see somebody who they can think that they can relate to, yeah, absolutely, it does help. And I make it a priority to, like I said, I was talking about earlier, to be able to listen to some, because a lot of times they'll come in, and it can be frustrating sometimes when they come in for a problem, especially in the ER, right? When they come in for like abdominal pain, say their stomach hurts, right, or they have a headache, and you're trying to address that, but then they start listing all the other problems that they have, and it can be frustrating. Okay, I gotta move on, right? But at the same time, I try to think, okay, why is this person telling me all their problems, right? Um, And sometimes people dismiss that. They go, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to listen. I need to move on, because I already know how to fix this problem when the minute you start talking to me. But then they start talking about other things, and I saw this a lot, in the ER. I see this a lot in primary care, and you start wondering, okay, why is this person? Why are they rambling, so to speak, right? Why are they talking to me about all this? Come to find out, maybe they live alone, right? Or let's say they are going through some things at home, and they've opened up to you because they look at you and they feel like maybe I can relate to you because of the way you look, the way you talk, your bedside manner. I think a lot of people have had healthcare providers who dismiss them. I've been dismissed. It's frustrating.
Absolutely.
It's frustrating because it's like I don't feel like I'm being heard, right? And so I try to make it a priority, and I take pride in my bedside manner, but I try to be able to listen, because that's one thing I wasn't good at. And I had a friend of mine who kind of had to teach me how to do that. And he said, half the time it's just listening. We're there to listen, and sometimes that is all they need, right? To develop that trust. If a guy comes in, who's their medical provider, and they don't want to listen, the trust is gone. The trust was never earned.
Yeah.
And how are they going to trust you with their problems if you can't take the time to listen to them too? And that was something to me that I had to kind of, like I said, I had to learn that. I wasn't very good at that at first, but yeah, that to me was a priority of mine.
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I just wanted to mention that I think maybe another reason why your patients were opening up to you. I mean, there must be some kind of connection there already. Because you don't open up to people that that you don't trust. So I think first of all, you must come across as that great energy already that they can make a connection to already. And I was just kind of curious, where did you learn that? Like you said that you weren't like that before. Did you learn that while you were doing your service here? Was that something that you picked up like working here?
It was definitely something I picked up a lot more in Hawaii. Absolutely. Because I learned quick, even in my training. It's like I was getting nowhere. Like I said, I did some training on Oahu. I was in Waianae Comprehensive Center for a few weeks before COVID hit. And then after COVID, I came back and worked at the Ko'olaloa Community Health Center for the North Shore. And I saw this particularly in the Waianae Comprehensive Center. And I think I learned this also at my time at the Bureau of Prisons, right, working with inmates, is, you see people that come in of all ages, right? You see people, you see aunties, you see little kids, you see older people, you see younger people of all ages. And again, like I said before, they don't trust you until you give them a reason to trust you. And I feel like I had to find a way, because in emergency medicine as a paramedic, it was just boom, next, right, in and out. I didn't really have time to listen because we were transporting patients to the hospital. I had maybe 10, 15 minutes with them, right? And so it was just boom, out, on to the next. And so when I went to PA school, and I'm, learning how to take care of patients in the emergency setting in Waianae, where I think it's safe to say that there's not a whole lot of trust in the healthcare community and on that side of the island particularly. I learned that quick. I had some injuries that came in, patients that I probably would not have approached on the street, that were opening up to me, because that were talking to me. And I realized right then and there in that moment that if I listen, I'm getting somewhere with them. And then that's something that we homed in with a friend of mine who I worked with in Kanohe, who would tell me the same thing. He's like, I might see so many patients a day, and to some people they're a number, but this is somebody's grandparents, right? This is somebody's grandma. This is a brother. This is a son. This is a daughter. And they also have problems, right? We look at them. Some people look at them as a number. You got to get past that, right? You got to get past that, and that to me was what clicked for me, and I think that really made me a better healthcare provider.
That's a great example of why we need more Kanaka Kāne in healthcare. Because our old Lahui here is suffering from health disparities.
Yeah.
And and we're taking up too much room in the prisons, and having a male provider who's you can relate to, and building that trust, I mean, I think that's just, even more reasons why we need more, right? More male, I mean, Kanaka Maoli in healthcare.
Yeah.
But, I mean, any tips of how we go about that?
That's a good question. We have to find a way to break that cycle that we were talking about earlier, because, like you said, a lot of times the new generation tends to do what the old generation does, right? Because that's what they see. My dad, he works. Let's say, my dad works at the airport, right? He works construction. That means I'm going to be construction when I grow up. But I think making education a lot more obtainable, giving people an interest in doing these things, right? To be able to, and if they want to go into healthcare, I think that's how you make, you bring more, and it's Kāne and Wahine both into the healthcare. There's a lot more women than men in the healthcare because it just tends to draw more attention from women. And I think men, there's a lot more blue collar workers than men, right? And they go out and do other jobs. But there is still that interest, and I think we need to, like I try to take job shadows. Like when kids in high school, I remember one year I did go to a high school in the area because they had like a career day, and a friend of mine who was a principal, and he's like, hey, if you wouldn't mind coming in and talking to some of these students, just what you do. And I look back at my experience, I would not have been able to go. I would not have had any interest in the healthcare facility if it wasn't for those people that I mentioned earlier, who talked to me about it. And I think talking about what you do, doing things like this podcast or the Papa'olo Kahi program, going to schools, pitching a tent out in the, at a community center, and talking about what you do, I think that is how we're going to get to the community. I think for me, what I've seen, what's helped me is that right there.
Yeah, I concur. I think we definitely need more engagement, especially with the youth. And they can see, role models that look like them.
Yeah.
And, and they can, they can believe that, I also can do this. I don't, because even my family, I think 99% of the men in my family all work construction,
Yeah.
I've got a cousin who's a teacher, but everybody else is blue collar jobs. So it is a curiosity. But I think we need to try ways to break the cycle. And
I think with what you had said there, I think the reason why is because, whenever people talk about going into healthcare, whether it's medical school to be a physician, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, they always go, "Oh, I don't want to go to school for that long." That's always the thing I hear. I did 4 years of undergrad and 2.5 postgrad, right? And so some people hear that and they go, "That's a lot, right?" Medical school's 4 years plus residency on top of it, plus your undergrad. And that turns a lot of people off. They don't, "Oh, I don't want to do that. Why do I have to go do that? If I'm in high school, I can go work construction, make good money. I don't need to go to school for that. I can just hit the ground running. I make good money." And you're right, you do make a lot of good money. But what happens when your back goes out, right? What happens when you get arthritis, right? And now you can't work. And I feel like that right there, and not to disparage blue collar workers, and some of the hardest working people I know are blue collar workers. But people who want to go into healthcare, who get turned off at the idea of a lot of schooling, I think that right there needs to be addressed somehow. If it's easy, everybody's going to do it, right? And so there has to be a reason to do it, to know that it's going to take me a long time, but know that at the end of all this journey, there's a reward at the end. I think that's what helped me.
Yeah, something recently just came out here too. They were promoting construction, because there's going to be and currently, and there will be continuing a lot more construction. Yeah. So, I mean, it was on the news, that I think some young gentleman spoke about he was going to go to college, and and then the blue, this came about, and he can make such and such, and within 3-4 years after he gets his journeyman, he's going to be here, and he listens to that, and that totally dissuades people from wanting to, put themselves in debt in school, or study some more, because not that much people can go to school for 4, 5, 6 more years, after high school.
And you're not making any money when you're in school, right? So, and you're living off of saltine crackers and top ramen, and Simon. So it's like, that's the life of going to school. But I feel like if we can educate, the younger generations of, hard work and what pays off with hard work, whether it's going to school or whether it's, a blue collar job, whatever the job may be, I think the work ethic is what we need to address, right? Some of these younger generations, and we see this with some of the students that we get here in the ER, that they just want things given to them, right? They don't want to work hard, or they want to put in 60%. Well, unfortunately, that's not how the world works, right? And so I feel like we need to work on our work ethic. I think that's kind of a big thing. You look at the generations before us, my dad, my grandfather, my great grand, the older generations. Those are some of the hardest working generations I know, and that's because they had that work ethic in them. So
yeah, I definitely think with not just the social media and with this new generation, where I think it's kind of an American thing too. The want for immediate gratification.
Yep.
Not putting in the hana, not putting in the work, not seeing the big picture. You just see, right now what I can get right now. And I think it may be an American issue.
Yeah, I think so. It's the I want it now. I mean, you even see this with, you go drive through at McDonald's, right? It's like, oh, the ice cream machine not working. Oh, you don't have this, and it's like you're literally driving to a window who's giving you food and you're complaining.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of complaining about things like that. But yeah, we've grown to want accommodation right away, right? If we have to wait more than 5 minutes, we get upset. And we see some of those patients, by the way, they come into the ER. It's like they come into the ER thinking I'm going to be in and out. The average ER wait is 3 to 4 hours. And being in there, not waiting to be seen, but sometimes you got to wait a couple hours before you're even seen. And people get really upset because they want to be seen now. They want things now. They want things right away. And that, I don't know how to fix that. I think it starts with weeding those people out with the new generation and getting the new generation, fixing, working with them. But I don't know. I don't know how to fix that.
We've got a question from Isabella here, if you don't mind. While family support is essential, what coping strategies did you create and practice to stay on your journey to complete your career goal?
It's a good question. Using my family, I did use them as my motivation, but I work. I know my coworkers, my classmates always told me I was crazy, but I would do school, and then right after school, I would cross the street and go into the library, and I'd be there for 5-6 hours sometimes, studying what I had learned that day. And I took it more seriously while everyone else went. But the coping strategies that I created practice to stay on your journey. I took time for myself, right? I worked hard. I played hard. I had to know when to pause. There were times where I had family functions. A kid had something, or we had a dinner, and yeah, there are times where I couldn't go. There are times where, hey, I'm sorry, I got to focus on my schooling, because I told my wife before school started, hey, listen, like, you and the kids are always going to be a priority, but while I'm in school, this needs to be almost more, because we have to get this done. But in order to get through that, you have to know when to pause. You have to know when to take care of yourself. You have to know when to put the book down. I think that was the hard thing for me, because in my mindset, the schooling, I wasn't going into accounting where I had to do numbers. I wasn't going into business where I wasn't going to be on a computer. Like, what I had learned, I was like, if I don't learn these things, this is somebody's family member that I'm going to, this is a human being. This is life, right? And that's not something I want to mess up. And so I took it a lot more seriously. And it was hard for me sometimes to walk away from schooling, because, not that I was addicted to it, but because I felt like I had a duty to myself. I had a duty to my kids, and I had a duty to my wife to get through this and not fail. But in order to get through that, you have to know when to pause and have fun. You have to know when to put that away and walk away, and recharge your batteries. So I think that was probably the biggest strategy for me, was when to stop. And because it comes down to, what's the discipline in studying, right? What's the discipline in working, and how far are you going to study, right? Because we had tests, we had things we had to get done, and if we failed those tests, we get kicked out of the program. I was like, I'm paying a lot of money. I'm paying to be here. Like, there's a lot of money involved in this. I can't risk to fail this. But at the same time, you have to know when to stop. And I think that was the biggest thing for me.
I I totally concur. I think it is a huge struggle. We live in this system. It's all about a lot of it's work, 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 work. Otherwise, you're lazy. And and when people like us who are trying to lift ourselves up and our families up, you cannot fail, right? Failure is not an option, and so it's extremely difficult, right, to really find the balance. Yeah, with that, and I commend you. I commend you. On in all of your work and all of your achievement. Amazing. So, I mean, what's the next steps from here? Like, working and specializing, or
I like working where I'm at right now. I'm working in the emergency department. I think to me it's rewarding because I'm challenging myself, right? It's a challenge to work in that environment. But I've got great coworkers. I've got great people that I work with who are always willing to teach and to learn. As far as what's next, time will tell. But I think for now, I'm in a good place. We're making the best of what we have and getting through it. So I think where we're at right now is where we need to be. Whether or not I pursue a higher degree of education after this, I've told you the idea of going back to school and getting a PhD maybe, but that's I need a pause. I need a break. But yeah, right now I like where I'm at. I like being where I'm at right now. We'll see. I don't know. Never say never.
Yeah, that's true. You're still a young man, you know. Still a lot of life ahead of you.
Yeah, no, we do. I noticed this question here about if my kids want to go into healthcare. I'm going to encourage them to go to healthcare. I don't think there's a career that I'll tell my kids not to go into unless obviously it's illegal. But I think if they want to go into healthcare, yeah, I would encourage anybody because of how rewarding it can be, right? Because it's a field where you can definitely reap the rewards. Not so much about money. I mean, that's nice. It's always nice to make money in what you do. But at the end of the day, it's how fulfilled. I know people who make a lot of money who don't feel fulfilled, right? And it's like, at what point, at what job can you be in that is fulfilling? And to me, healthcare checks the boxes. So I would definitely encourage my kids to do that if they wanted to. But you do what they want. They're dancers, so who knows? They might just be dancing.
That's a hard job.
Yeah. That's not something I can do.
Yeah. Me neither. I'm a wallflower myself.
Yeah.
Just cruise them, find a chair, sit down,
Yeah.
Have any of your children shown any interest in the healthcare?
They're really young right now. My youngest is 6. I got 6, 10, and 13. Not yet, but we'll see. We'll see. I didn't get an interest really until I was in my teens, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Just enjoy them while they're young, yeah.
Oh yeah. They can worry about schooling later.
Yeah. And then you pay for it. Oh, they're Hawaiians, right? The Native Hawaiians.
Hey, there we go. Hey, I'll put it in the applications then.
Right. Start young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mahalo. Anything else? Anything else you want to talk about right now? Awesome. That was really awesome. It was nice talking to you.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. To be able to talk. I really enjoy doing things like this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. We appreciate your time so much, and and your story and your mana'o. Priceless. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to say mahalo to Moana and Dana of Moana Nui Podcast. Mahalo, Ian, for joining us. And please join us on the next podcast on January 24th with Corey Lehano. He's a pharmacist on Maui. And happy holidays, everyone, and we'll see you next year. Thank you, Ian.
Mahalo.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will. If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves a republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah. Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. The work of all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will. So if you put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system. Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. The work of all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.